You are IFH too?
No, I don't know who is that.
Okay.
Maybe we were Kishore.
Oh, okay. No problem.
And my FH recording.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, smile. Renan Joker's smile is very special.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivrajakaacharya Ashtottara Shishyam Divine Grace Labai Charnarinda Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivrajakaacharya Ashtottara Shishyam Divine Grace Srila Bhaktivedanta Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. आनंद कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की नामाचार्य श्रीदास ठाकुर की प्रेम से श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवस्ति गौर भक्त वृंद की श्री श्री राधा गोपी जना वल्लभ गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरी गोवर्धन की मथुरा वृंदावन धाम की मायापुर नवदीप धाम की पुरुषोत्तम श्री जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की गंगा माई की जमुना माई की भक्ति देवी की तुलसी महारानी की समवेत भक्त वृंद की ताय गौर हरि प्रेमानंद all assembled devotees, all assembled devotees, all assembled devotees. All glories, Shri Guru and Gauranga, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 26, text number 17. So before starting, it's quite an embarrassing situation for me that today morning I asked Prabhu that Prabhuji, please give the class. And Prabhuji said, no, I'm not giving, you're giving. And then I was thinking in my mind actually, that I'm completely unqualified to speak Srimad Bhagavatam. I mean, my consciousness is really, at least I am quite disgusted with my consciousness. So hopefully by speaking, my goal is that I can, whatever His Grace Prabhu wants to do here, whatever, his mission, his mode, hopefully I can carry that forward, and basically I hope he can, speak through me and he can inspire all of you, because, yeah, I can say everyone here is senior to me in consciousness. I mean, doesn't matter external things, but senior in consciousness. So I'm not qualified to speak in front of all of you, but I'll try to speak. So 3:26:17. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So Canto 3, Chapter 26, text number 17. प्रकृतेर्गुणसाम्यस्य निर्विशेषस्य मानवी चेष्टा यतः स भगवान् काल इति उपलक्षितः प्रकृतेर्गुणसाम्यस्य निर्विशेषस्य मानवी चेष्टा यतः स भगवान् काल इति उपलक्षितः प्रकृतेर्गुणसाम्यस्य निर्विशेषस्य मानवी चेष्टा यतः स भगवान् काल इति उपलक्षितः प्रकृतेर्गुणसाम्य निर्विशेषस्य मानवी चेष्टा यतः स भगवान् काल इति उपलक्षितः प्रकृते of material nature guna samyasya without interaction of the three modes nirvisheshasya without specific qualities manavi, O daughter of Manu, cheshta movement yatha from whom saha he Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Time, iti, thus, upalakshitaha is designated. Translation. My dear mother, O daughter of Swayambhu Manu, the time factor, as I've explained, is the Supreme Personality of Godhead from whom the creation begins as a result of the agitation of the neutral, unmanifested nature. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Asa Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The unmanifested state of material nature pradhan is being explained. The Lord says that when the unmanifested material nature is agitated by the glance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it begins to manifest itself in different ways. Before this agitation, it remains in the neutral state without interaction by the three modes of material nature. In other words, material nature cannot produce any variety of manifestations without the contact of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is very nicely explained in Bhagavad Gita. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of the products of material nature. Without his contact, material nature cannot produce anything. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita also, a very suitable example is given in this connection. Although the nipples on a goat's neck appear to be breast nipples, they do not give milk. Similarly, material nature appears to the material scientist to act and react in a wonderful manner, but in reality, it cannot act without the agitator, time, who is a representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When time agitates the neutral state of material nature begins to produce varieties of manifestations. Ultimately, it is said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the cause of creation. As a woman cannot produce children unless impregnated by a man, material nature cannot produce or manifest anything unless it is impregnated by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of the time factor. Om Ajnana Timirandasya ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकथा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपां साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्ण पादान सगन ललिता श्री विशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधो दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी श्री राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासदि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। मूकं करोति वाचालं पंगुं लंघयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे श्रीगुरुं दीनतारिणं परमानंद माधवं श्री चैतन्येश्वरम्। So, again, begging the blessings of all the devotees, speak something on Srimad Bhagavatam. So, Srimad Bhagavatam, the purpose of Srimad Bhagavatam is to awaken the living entities from the state of sleeping to the state of activity. So that's why Krishna consciousness is activity. It's not just an idle meditation, it's activity. And although in the material world, in the world of yoga, in the world of karma, uh, activity is generally related with the mode of passion. And spirituality means meditation. But Srila Prabhupada says that our activities are meditation. So Krishna consciousness means an active interest, active uh, intention expressed through activity to please Krishna and Krishna's devotees. So that's why Srila Prabhupada termed everything in Krishna consciousness as spiritual. Even the so-called quote unquote material things which may not be directly connected to Krishna, it is Krishna conscious activity. And by doing those activities, one will make advancement in Krishna consciousness. And the principle is Shri Shri Radha Gopi Jana Vallabh Bhagavan Gaurahi Jal Guru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So the principle is to glorify their lordships. So that's the principle. And the deeper principle is actually to please the Vaishnavas. That's the deeper principle. The deepest principle of Krishna consciousness, which stems from Golok Vrindavan, is actually to please the devotees. So there we please the eternal associates, and here we please the devotees, the exalted devotees of the Lord, starting from, ending in Srila Prabhupada. So that's why it's very important to understand this principle that Krishna consciousness is activity. It's not idle meditation, but it's actually an activity. So here in the purport, first let's go to the translation. So here the Supreme Personality of Godhead is glorified because he is the ultimate factor, the time factor, who actually kickstarts the creation. So time is the most powerful force in this material world. The most powerful force in this material world is actually time. So by the influence of time, everything happens. Like Srila Prabhupada says, that by the influence of time, there is birth, there is growth, there is change, there is reproduction, there is decay, and there is death. So these 6 stages happen because of the time factor. And everything in this material world has value because of time. If we just think about the influence of time, that from the very beginning, we ask how old you are. And based on the number of years that you have lived, you are judged. Okay, you are this much old, so you should be this much mature. You should have studied this much. you should have acquired this much, you should be this much intelligent, etc., etc., etc. So everything is measured by time in this material world, and Krishna is the controller of time. So isn't it really wonderful to think that since Krishna is the controller of time, then by being the servant of Krishna, by engaging Krishna's service, then you can transcend time, you can overcome time, you can. And how to overcome the force of time? By remaining in the present situation. So being in the present is very, very important, and that's a real spiritual life. If we just diverging with the tangents, diverting from the purport for a second, that why are we in Krishna consciousness? We are in Krishna consciousness to be Krishna conscious, as simple as that. That's the goal of our life, is to become Krishna conscious. Because if you see, even in the life of the exalted devotees, starting from Srila Prabhupada, they display no attachment to whatever they have done in this world. They're not attached to it. I mean, of course it's a service, but they're not attached, they don't identify. Srila Prabhupada does never identified himself as the founder Acharya. Srila Prabhupada himself never identified himself as Srila Prabhupada, so he identified himself as an insignificant, I mean, of course Srila Prabhupada is a pure devotee, but just trying to glorify Prabhupada's consciousness. Prabhupada identified himself as an insignificant servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna. So this was Prabhupada's identification. Even Prabhupada would sometimes identify himself as a servant of his disciples, said, oh, you are all doing so nice, but I am not able to do. So Prabhupada would identify himself in that way. So what does that mean? That means that if the exalted souls are setting that kind of consciousness, then we have to follow in their footsteps. Mahajano ena gatasya pantha. So we have to follow in the footsteps of great souls who have this kind of consciousness of action and inaction, and inaction in action, like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. So they're doing, but they don't identify themselves as the doer. And when they're not doing also, in action, they see action, which means they see the power of Supreme Personality of Godhead there, the influence of Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in that way, because they are completely free from this designation of I and mine, because of that, they can transcend the time factor. Because only person who can transcend the time factor is someone who is directly connected with Krishna. So the time factor does not mean that the body will not change, but all it means is that we are not affected by the change. We're not affected by the change, the time change. Our activity continues the same way. Like, for example, if you look at Radha Gopijana Vallabh, they are not affected by time. Whether it's summer or winter, whether it's day or night, it doesn't matter, because they continue their eternal pastimes. So in the same way, when we become connected to them, our service to them is uninterrupted, and our service to them is not affected by time. So now coming to the purport. So Pradhan, the unmanifested state of material nature, is not manifest, or is not ultimately, does not give rise to whatever we see in this world in the form of so many different types of living entities and situations, weather, etc., unless the Lord glances. So when the Lord glances, that glance is actually explained as Shambhu, Lord Shiva. So by the Lord's glance, the material nature is impregnated with living entities. The material nature is agitated, and by the agitation of material nature, by the injection of living entities, so many different things start to happen in this world. So this material world is basically comprised of Sattvagun, Rajagun, and Tamagun. These are the three principal modes of material nature which are actually working in this world. And Prabhupada says we can have unlimited permutations and combinations of these three modes, and that's how everything is working in this world. So Prabhupada is saying that without the touch of the Supreme Lord, nothing can happen. So the touch of the Supreme Lord is the most important factor, is the cause, is the ultimate cause. And when we see the how Supreme Personality of Godhead is touching this material nature in the form of the various manifestations, as devotees, we can appreciate, number one, we can deeply appreciate how Krishna has given the living entities in this world a wonderful opportunity to cultivate devotional service. My spiritual master says that this material, this earth planet, especially this earth planet, since we are in this earth planet, is a reflection of Golok Vrindavan. And it makes sense also because in the heavenly planet, there is no Golok Vrindavan. That's why the demigods have to come and take this world to actually uh, take advantage of Vrindavan Dham, Mayapur Dham, Jagannath Puri Dham, etc., etc. So we are very fortunate, and just like in the spiritual world in Golok Vrindavan, all the gopas and gopis and the elderly, the elderly gopas and elderly gopis and younger gopis and the cowherd boys, they have a lot of they have a lot of contact, they have a lot of service to Krishna directly. That's true. But at the same time, they also have a lot of service and a lot of contact with the Dham itself. So why? Because Prabhupada says, Tad Dhama Vrindavanam. This is Krishna is very dear. So Krishna's association of Krishna everywhere is actually reflection of Vrindavan. And because Krishna is personal associates of Krishna, they actually serve them. They serve them. So in the same way, when we see this material world and the different aspects of this material world, uh, if we serve this material nature, thinking in such a way, having this conception that is actually a reflection of the spiritual world, then slowly, as our Krishna consciousness becomes more and more deep, then we will see Krishna's touch everywhere. Like, for example, the gopis are thinking that, oh, the wind is so fortunate because the wind, it has so much opportunity to touch, to collect the dust from the lotus feet of Krishna. The wind can be with Krishna all the time. In the same way, they glorify the Yamuna, that the Yamuna, without any hindrance, without any kind of obstruction, has the association of Krishna every day. And then they glorify the land of Vrindavan. So in this way, they start glorifying, they say, everyone is fortunate except for us. We are not able to take Krishna's association. We are so unfortunate. So in this way, they're expressing, and in this way, they're glorifying all the different uh, aspects of Golok Vrindavan. So in the same way, as our consciousness matures, we can also think like that. We can think like that. And then we can see that is a real meaning. I mean, I'm not qualified, but that's a real meaning of seeing Krishna everywhere, is to see actually Krishna's Vrindavan pastimes everywhere. That's the goal of our spiritual life. That's the goal. The goal of our spiritual life is, by our meditation, by our consciousness, is to transform this material world into Golok Vrindavan for us personally. So that's just a matter of consciousness. So if our consciousness becomes more and more deep and more mature, then naturally we'll see, like many times we have this experience that when our consciousness is good, when we see the word we, immediately we remember, oh, Vrindavan. When we see the word R, letter R, we remember Radharani. Or when we see like this, we remember. It's there in the memory, and Krishna gives that kind of remembrance when Krishna becomes pleased with our consciousness. So Krishna is the ultimate controller of the material and spiritual world. And for Krishna, there is no concept of material and spiritual. For Krishna, everything is spiritual. Why? Because Krishna is completely full of bliss and full of happiness. And Krishna is the ultimate father of all living entities. And because Krishna is fully pure and he's a father of all living entities, naturally he sees spirit everywhere. And you can see how in that way how Krishna dealt with so many living entities in this material world. Krishna had no problem. Krishna had no problem because that is Krishna's vision. Krishna's vision. So we can also develop that kind of vision by the mercy of Krishna. So the goal of our Krishna conscious life is to please Krishna, is to please Krishna. And to please Krishna means to please Krishna's devotees. Devotees of Krishna are our Lord and Master. They are our real deities. They are our real deliverers of mercy. Krishna Kripa Shivmurti. So the more and more we please the devotees of the Lord, the more and more we are pleasing the Lord. And that is the proper understanding. We may not be able to please everyone, but we may not be able to, but we should have the desire to please. That's very, very important. So coming back to Krishna's devotees, how are Krishna's devotees so special in our spiritual life? Krishna's devotees are so special in our spiritual life. Why? Because they decide how much advancement we make. When we please devotees of the Lord, then we get special grace from Krishna to go beyond our conditioning. Because ordinarily by our conditioning, it's a loop, it's a cycle. You have a particular kind of conditioning. As a result of that conditioning, you'll have a particular kind of consciousness according to the three modes. According to that consciousness, you will perform devotional service in a particular way. And according to that consciousness, that much Krishna will be pleased or displeased with you. So if you look at it, it's quite depressing when you consider that oh, I only have this much consciousness, and because my consciousness is only so much, so by that consciousness, my advancement is very limited. Year after year, day after day, it's quite simple to predict, like, okay, this is my chanting today, this is my service today, this is my consciousness today. After 15 years also, there's not going to be much difference. But when we please devotees, when we actively try to please devotees by all the different ways, maybe giving a flower, giving Mahaprasad, maybe paying obeisances, maybe speaking some sweet words of genuine encouragement, genuine appreciation, doing some service, etc., etc., etc. By this constant endeavor to please the devotees, we are getting grace to go beyond our conditioning. So this is the greatest gift of our Krishna conscious movement, is the greatest opportunity to please devotees of the Lord. And what is the greatest mercy of Krishna? The greatest mercy of Krishna is the association of Krishna's exalted devotees. And what does it mean to have the association of the devotees of the Lord? It means to serve them. And His Holiness Radha Maharaj explained so nicely that what does service actually mean? So he said that service means that you feel unqualified for it, you're very grateful for it, and at the same time, you're very happy doing it. You're very happy doing that service. So Maharaj is explaining, Radhanath Maharaj is explaining that how Dukhi Krishna Das, by that Seva Bhav, he attracted Radharani's attention. And because of that, Radharani left her ankle bell in that Seva Kunj area to give him ultimate perfection. So when we are very happy to be humble, we're very happily taking the humble position, and we're very grateful to take the humble position. We're very grateful for the service. Then that pleases Krishna the most, because ultimately it's ultimately a game of consciousness. Krishna consciousness means to increase our consciousness, and consciousness is actually everything. His Holy Chandrasekhar Maharaj said a very, very amazing point. I'll never forget this, probably till the end of my life. He said that if you work up here, which is referring to the mind, he said, if you work up here, then when you come out and you function in this material world, you try to serve the devotees, you try to practice your sadhana, everything becomes so easy. Everything becomes so easy. So the ultimate point in Krishna consciousness is actually sadhana bhakti. That's why Srila Prabhupada made chanting 16 rounds the minimum. So, of course, we need to do service, we need to read books, we need to serve devotees. But if someone just stands 16 rounds, like especially in their old age, they're not able to do anything, then that's qualifies as devotional service. Why? Because the greatest service to Krishna is to think of him. That's the greatest service to Krishna. And of course, because in the initial condition stage, speaking about myself, because I'm not qualified to think of Krishna for so long, therefore I have to engage in other services. I have to do so many variety of things because I'm not so mature. But the goal is to think of Krishna 24 hours a day. That's the goal. So when we have serious sadhana, and sadhana especially in the association of the devotees of the Lord, and we relish that because there is special sweetness of executing sadhana bhakti in the association of devotees. You can do arti alone, you can chant alone, you can study Bhagavatam alone. But when you're in the association of devotees, it has a special taste. It is a special flavor, gives a special kind of inspiration, Krishna conscious inspiration. When you get that taste, then all other taste, even in this society of Krishna consciousness, whether someone appreciates you or not, etc., it has no value. I mean, it has very little value compared to that kind of joy that you experience in your heart. So we actually have the greatest opportunity to increase our Krishna consciousness by practicing devotional service in the association of the great devotees. That's why it's so important. This conception of community is so important. This conception of association is so important uh, in our society. And like devotees who don't see this aspect of ISKCON, it becomes very difficult for them to be grateful. It becomes very difficult for them to take a humble position. Why should I take a humble position? What will I get by taking a humble position? I mean, naturally, we ask this question, why should I take a humble position? Why should I become humble? Because we want taste, because we want spiritual experience, because we want to go forward in our spiritual life. So unless we have experience, unless we physically experience, how can we develop attachment to sadhana? How can we develop attachment to the idea of developing our Krishna consciousness? Because Krishna consciousness is very subtle, very spiritual. I mean, spiritual, subtlest thing. So the result of Krishna consciousness ultimately is in our consciousness. It's not external. I mean, it is external, all right. But if the result is there in your consciousness, that's the real fruit of your activity. So is in the consciousness. Is in the consciousness. So when the consciousness becomes more and more pure, more and more divine, and you have more and more, you can say, visions, more and more experiences of the spiritual world in this world, then that means you're going in the correct direction. But if you're not having such experiences, then that means you're just doing things mechanically. I'm speaking for myself. I'm a mechanical person. So especially Prabhupada said that when we see the deities, if we see the deities sometime and we're not pleased, we're not happy, that means something is wrong with our spiritual life. Something is seriously wrong, Prabhupada said. So how do you get that kind of vision? Can you wear some glasses? No. It's only possible when you purify your consciousness. And that's why every devotee in Krishna consciousness has to know very clearly that what he has to do in his daily life, what he has to do in his daily sadhana to actually bring his consciousness to a higher and higher level. What should he do? How should he do his seva? For every devotee, it's different, but it's very, very important. Very, very important. And that's why external association is not enough. See, many times, just think about it. We are sitting with devotees, taking prasad with devotees. But when we hear the class, when we are dancing with devotees in the kirtan, we become all so much more enlivened. Why? Because we're engaging Krishna conscious activities. And to be honest, while speaking many times, speaking for myself, it just goes into prajalpa. It just goes into useless talk. Even sometimes in the name of humility, oh Prabhu, I am very fallen, I am very fallen. That is just a honest. This humility is excellent, looks like humility, but but it just kind of revolves around me. I am very fallen. I. So it's not speaking about Krishna. So it does not bring advancement. But when you speak about Krishna, who cares about how impure or how fallen we are? But if we just glorify Krishna, then that's so much more enlifting, uplifting, enlivening to our consciousness. So we have to see devotees, but we have to see Krishna behind devotees. This is also a very important thing, because if we don't see Krishna behind devotees, then we will see devotees as material people. We will see devotees as just, oh, this devotee is upset with me, this devotee is saying this. But when you see Krishna behind, then that actually helps us to see them as agents or missionaries or representatives of Krishna. Okay, this devotee spoke like this to me, means Krishna is speaking like that to me, or Radharani is speaking like that to me. So then we can actually connect with the eternal nature of that person. Like, just for the sake of example, my spiritual master one time was explaining that one time Vishaka Devi, she actually put the pillow at Krishna's head, and the pillow was thinking to itself that why am I always at Krishna's head? I want to taste the sweetness and the touch of Krishna's lotus feet. So the pillow, by his own desire, crawled to Krishna's lotus feet and was there. So when Lalita Devi saw that, she became very upset, and she chastised Vishaka Devi very heavily, like, what did you do? You're so careless in your service. And then I was thinking that in the spiritual world also anger is there. So in the spiritual world also different personalities are there. Some personalities are there very soft, some are very strong, like this. So in the spiritual world there is so much variety. So then when we interact with devotees, we sometimes think, oh, this devotee, he's very strong, he's very heavy, whatever he speaks is very heavy. But then when we think about Krishna, when we think that, oh, Krishna is inspiring to act like that, maybe in the spiritual world, that's his eternal nature. That's his eternal nature. Prabhupada said that our nature does not have to be destroyed. It just has to be spiritualized. It just has to be purified. So the thing is, when we see in that light, we can appreciate that, oh, this devotee is acting like that for the pleasure of Krishna. And Krishna is pleased. Krishna is pleased with both of them. So this gives a new light, and it helps us to be situated in Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, we become agitated, become disturbed. Oh, this devotee is always like this. His nature is like this. I don't want to speak with him. I don't want to deal with him. So that's why it's very important to see Krishna behind the activities of devotees. And that's why Prabhupada says that Krishna is the ultimate cause of everything. The ultimate cause. Krishna is not the direct cause, but Krishna is the ultimate cause of everything. So that means that Krishna can be accessed from anywhere. Just like Nursing Chaturdashi is coming, that His Holiness Sachinandan Maharaj said that Prahlad Maharaj was seeing Krishna in the pillar. And just maybe 1 minute before Nrsimhadev appeared, Prahlad Maharaj saw the form of Krishna. He saw the two-handed form of Krishna smiling, very enchanting and very sweet. And naturally his heart melted. And so because of that, he was fearless. So if Prahlad Maharaj can see the Supreme Lord in the pillar, means Lord Krishna, Srimati Radharani, they are everywhere. They can be accessed from everywhere and anywhere. There is no limitation even in this material world. So it's just a matter of tuning our consciousness more and more and more. So by very strict sadhana, serious sadhana, and by association of devotees, then we can actually perform seva. Because what is seva? Seva does not mean just some physical material activity. Of course, everything is purifying in Krishna consciousness. But seva means ultimately we are trying to offer our love and affection to the Lord in the form of activity. So unless we have fine tuning of sadhana and seva, and especially constant blessing of senior devotees, only then is it possible for us to actually perform seva. And then by their causeless mercy, we will be able to appreciate and always feel unqualified for seva. Just like Dukhi Krishna Das, you just think about it, that is sweeping every day for days, for months, for years. How easy it is to become familiar with such a service. It's so easy. I mean, what to speak of that? Even with deities, it's so easy to become familiar. This is Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is Krishna. This is Golok Vrindavan. When we're entering the altar, this is Vrindavan. This is spiritual world. But so easily, we become distracted. We become, I mean, speak for myself, we become familiar. And we're just concerned with the number of circles and the number of whatever external things. But think about Dukhi Krishna Das, how easy it was for him to become familiar, but he never became familiar. He always had that feeling that he's unqualified. He's always had such gratitude in his heart. So how this is possible? By sadhana, by seva. I mean, by sadhana and by sangha. So sangha is very, very important. What does sangha mean? Sangha means to hear. Sangha means to hear. So when we are hearing seriously in our Krishna consciousness again and again, then we become inspired in our Krishna consciousness. So this is a very wonderful verse from Bhagavad Gita. This is a chapter 6, verse 35, that famous verse where Krishna says, Lord Shri Krishna said, O mighty arm, son of Kunti, it is undoubtedly very difficult to curb the restless mind, but it is possible by suitable practice and detachment, and by detachment. No, Bhagavad Gita 6:35. So in the purport, Prabhupada says something really inspiring. This is very inspiring for me. So Prabhupada first speaks about the external processes like, restraining the senses, observing celibacy, etc., etc. So, I mean, I'm speaking for myself. I feel that I'm not qualified to be a brahmachari, but anyways, Prabhupada, you will show Prabhu there tolerating, tolerant. So Prabhupada first tells all those processes are virtually impossible because real celibacy, real brahmacharya means that to be 100% pure 100% of the time, which is too high. So then Prabhupada says, by the practice of Krishna consciousness, however, one engages in 9 types of devotional service to the Lord. The first and foremost of such devotional engagements is hearing about Krishna. This is a very powerful transcendental method for purging the mind of all misgivings. The more one hears about Krishna, the more one becomes enlightened and detached from everything that draws the mind away from Krishna. Again, the more one hears about Krishna, the more one becomes enlightened and detached from everything that draws the mind away from Krishna. By detaching the mind from activities not devoted to the Lord, one can very easily learn vairagya. Vairagya means detachment from matter and engagement of the mind in spirit. Impersonal spiritual detachment is more difficult than attaching the mind to the activities of Krishna. This is practical because by hearing about Krishna, one becomes automatically attached to the Supreme Spirit. This attachment is called parishanubhava, spiritual satisfaction. It is just like the feeling of satisfaction a hungry man has for every morsel of food he eats. Similarly, by discharge of devotional service, one feels transcendental satisfaction as the mind becomes detached from material objectives. It is something like curing a disease by expert treatment and appropriate diet. Hearing of the transcendental activities of Lord Krishna is therefore expert treatment for the mad mind, and eating the foodstuff offered to Krishna is the appropriate diet for the suffering patient. This treatment is the process of Krishna consciousness. So Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So it's an amazing purport. So it speaks about the importance of hearing. So when we hear from great souls again and again and again, then we get their qualities. We get their qualities. And by their qualities, by getting their qualities, we understand how to please them. We understand their mood, we understand how to please them. And by pleasing them, we make the real progress in the spiritual life. So that's why I feel as you progress in Krishna consciousness, yesterday I was speaking in the university also. The greatest friend and the greatest enemy to our Krishna consciousness is actually our tongue. So first is what we eat. So we have to eat from a person who is very serious in sadhana regularly. I mean, occasionally it's okay, but of course it should be prasad. But regular food should be taken from the hands of someone whose sadhana we know it, and someone who's very strict and very serious. That's the first very important thing. And second thing is talking. So we have to be very careful with our speech. And speak for myself. Many times I see when I spoke one line, just one line. Ordinary person may say, "Oh, Prabhu, this is no offense, nothing." But I know very well. The next day morning, I know that this was wrong and this has reduced my taste in Krishna consciousness. The deities are not looking the same now. So that is a red warning that, okay, something is wrong. Something is definitely wrong. So then immediately is Krishna's mercy, immediately go and rectify that. So we have to be very, very careful with these things. Otherwise, that's why Krishna consciousness is a very conscious, very careful cultivation. Very careful cultivation. So unless you're very conscious and serious and careful, it's not easy to make progress. It's not easy to make progress. So Krishna is the cause of everything. So it's not easy to realize that. But the more and more we can realize it, we can realize that, okay, this devotee, that devotee may be saying things. No, actually, Krishna is doing things through him. The more and more we can realize and we can feel that in our life, by hearing, by serving great souls, then the more we make progress. And one more thing also I want to clarify. So I'm not saying that sadhana is the only thing important. Seva is also equally important. But the real seva means when you actually have the deep desire in your heart to please Krishna. I'll give a simple example. It's a very simple example. This is nothing to do with consciousness, it's just physical activity. Suppose you're in Janmashtami time, you're working very hard, and okay, you made the offering, you're about to put it in the bowls. There is no time available to put in the bowls, very little time. Then you take one bowl. One bowl has little sabji on it, little something, some remnants is left from the previous offering, for example. And think about it, you are very tired, you're very frustrated, whatever it may be, because of less lack of sleep, because of so much service, mind is not very cooperative. At that moment, will you take that bowl and wash it and clean it and then put the new offering, or will you just put it, oh, no time is there? Will you do? It's dependent on your consciousness. It's dependent on whether you really have a desire to please Krishna or not, or you're just interested in finishing the activity. So this is the secret of seva. Krishna is seeing these things, these details in seva. Nobody is going to come and ask you how much sugar you put, how much salt you put. The devotees will say, yeah, it's wonderful. But the thing is, how much care are you taking? Like maybe 100, 200 details together make up one service. So Krishna is everywhere. Krishna is in every detail. Krishna is seeing everywhere. So if we are careless, if we are not conscious, and we just do things the way they are, we speak to devotees the way we want to speak, then we are not actually pleasing Krishna. We're doing the service, but we're not pleasing Krishna. People may say, great service, wonderful. But in our heart, the heart is not melting. I speak for myself, the heart is still like a stone. There are no feelings coming out for Krishna. There are no feelings coming out for devotees. Forget about Krishna, for devotees. Oh, this devotee is so wonderful. He's singing so nicely. Oh, I should become his servant. Think for myself, how many times does this thought come in my mind that I want the qualities of this devotee? So, bhakti is very close, but at the same time, it's very far, very far. So, when we are very careful and conscious, then we can actually develop this mood of being humbler and being very when we can actually have that consciousness of just desiring to please Krishna. It's a very simple thing, but it's not easy. Like the spiritual Guru says, bhakti is very simple, but it's not easy. So yes, at every moment, at everything, how can I please? How can I please? How can I please? So of course I'm seriously lacking in this regard, but I think Krishna wants me to become very careful. That's why Krishna is making me speak these words. But uh, our movement, our Krishna conscious movement to is means Prabhupada says openly that Jai Radha Madhav song, since Bhagavatam class I'm quoting, it's there in Jai Radha Madhav purport is there. Prabhupada personally speaking, that Jai Radha Madhav purport is also there on Vani Media. You can all hear it. Prabhupada is saying that the goal of our Krishna conscious movement is to make everyone Gopijana. So, of course, Prabhupada is saying other rasas also, but the point is to make everyone Brajvasi. So that's the mood of Brajvasi. See, someone who is, more of a awe and reverence person, someone who is more of a, rules and regulations person, he will think that, oh, he has to be a Brahmana, he has to follow so many rules and regulations, etc., etc. But someone who is in the real Vrindavan mood, he wants to elevate everyone else to that Vrindavan mood. That's the way a real Brajvasi thinks. So the real service we can do in our movement is to elevate everyone's consciousness, is to train everyone in such a way and train ourselves also in the process to actually become a pure devotee and to relish the taste of pleasing Krishna. We are not karmis, we are not jnanis. We don't want to just work and achieve things. We are not company. We are here to transform the consciousness. It's a movement of consciousness. That's why Prabhupada says Krishna consciousness. So when we keep that as our goal and we have the deep desire to give people the taste of Krishna consciousness, because the taste that someone can feel when they're appreciated by Krishna in the heart, nothing compares to that. Nothing compares to that. So that should be the goal of our Krishna conscious movement, is to elevate everyone. It's not that some people are qualified, some people are not qualified. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says every single living entity in all the 14 planet systems is qualified to cultivate the mood of Raja, the mood of Vrindavan. Everyone is qualified. So we should think like that. Should think like that. So of course, we may not be always be able to speak, but at least by our example, we should pray. We should pray. We should act in such a way that people are inspired. And actually, the greatest thing you can do for a person is actually to provide that consciousness. When your consciousness becomes very spiritual, very powerful, then what happens, that consciousness is very welcoming for another person. And by your consciousness, you're helping them to remember Krishna. If you have very high consciousness, I don't have, but if someone has a very high consciousness, you'll influence the other person's mind. And when another person's mind becomes very pure, all their activities become pure. And they make quick progress in Krishna consciousness. So actually, the real donation, the real benefit you can give is your consciousness. Your consciousness. So I'm not qualified. I'm sorry I spoke beyond my adhikar. I'm sorry. But I have a sincere desire to cultivate my consciousness, and instead of being like a thorn, being like a nuisance to others as I always am, I hope to change and actually to become kind of conducive and to do service to others by cultivating consciousness, by cultivating sincere Krishna consciousness. So I would like to end here. Please forgive me if I spoke anything wrong and inappropriate. Sorry, bro. His Grace Yorkshire Prabhu is that I think that's his greatest service to us. Is of course he does many things, but his greatest contribution is his consciousness. His consciousness is so deep and so powerful and so divine, and that's the greatest contribution, and that's what nobody else can replace. Nobody else can do that thing. But that's the most, from that consciousness stems all activities. Just as from Krishna everything is created, so from a divine consciousness everything is created. You cannot see it, cannot touch it, but that's a reality. Anyone has any question or comment online?
Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, thank you so much for a very nice class. Just a comment. You were mentioning about Dukhi Krishnadas, and yesterday Sri Gaurahari was so interested to hear about his pastime, and we were just discussing how his laulyam for hearing got him in the Sangha of the Goswamis, and especially under Jiva Goswami, and how his seva was so intense, and that laulyam of hearing was his basis. So thank you for sharing those highlights. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Anyone here has any question or comment, correction? Okay, if nobody has anything, then I would like to end here. Mancha kalpatarubhyasya kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavino anantakoti vaishnavino jai Srila Prabhupada. Please forgive me and please bless me that I can become serious.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhu.